blind black girl walks into a world-class music hall, only to be laughed at by a man who thinks talent is something you can see. But what happens when her hands touch the keys? Let us know in the comments section below. The audience laughed. Julian Blake smiled. Not a warm smile, not even a patronizing one, but the kind that curled at the edges like a sneer dressed in elegance. He was tall, golden-haired, and impossibly poised, dressed in a custom white blazer that shimmered under the lights of the conservatory's grand hall. The Steinway beside him glistened like a freshly sharpened knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian said, pacing the stage with the slow, confident steps of a man who had conquered every room he walked into. "Inspiration comes in all forms. But tonight, it seems it comes with a cane." Laughter again, this time harsher. Cameras clicked, phones recorded. A girl with dark skin, twist braids, and sunglasses stood quietly beside the stage manager. Her hand gripped a folding cane, white with a red tip. Her name was Natalie Osbourne, and she didn't flinch. Julian gestured toward her. "Our next performer is unexpected. Blind, apparently, self-taught, no formal training, no sheet music, and yet, somehow, here she is." He turned back toward the piano. "The judges insisted we allow her to play, so we will." He sat, cracking his knuckles one by one. The judges didn't speak. The crowd murmured. Backstage, Principal Rowe glanced at the program, shaking his head. "This was a mistake," he whispered to his assistant. "She should have never been put in this position." But Natalie, now escorted toward the bench by one of the interns, moved like someone who had walked this path 100 times before. Each tap of her cane was deliberate. Each step had rhythm. The hush that fell over the audience was heavy, like the tension before a thunderstorm. Then she sat. Not a single note had been played, yet her presence had bent the air in the room. 4 days earlier, Natalie Osbourne stood on the cracked steps of Roosevelt High, earbuds in, fingers twitching along the hem of her jacket. Not many people talked to her unless they had to. Most didn't know what to say, and Natalie didn't mind. She saw more without her eyes than most people did with both of theirs wide open. Marcus, her older brother, pulled up in his rusty Dodge Charger. The door creaked when she got in. "How was school?" "They served fish sticks again." Guess that means you skipped lunch." "Yes, it does." Marcus sighed. "You've been quiet all week." Natalie turned toward the window. "I got invited to something." Marcus blinked. "A party?" "A showcase, piano showcase, some kind of trial audition, conservatory thing." Marcus nearly missed the light turning green. Wait, you mean like that conservatory? Like the one with those freaky piano prodigies from Russia and stuff?" Natalie nodded. Marcus exhaled. "I posted a clip. Just my hands playing. Some girl named Tiffany reposted it. Then somebody sent it to someone, and now I have an invitation." "You gonna do it?" "You sure?" "Not really." Marcus reached across and squeezed her shoulder. "You've got the fingers, Nat. You've got something that can't be taught. Go show them." Tonight, Natalie played by memory in their tiny apartment. Her keyboard was second-hand, a little sticky on the lower G, and the speakers sometimes hissed. But when she played, the walls disappeared. She didn't play songs the way they were written. She played them the way they felt. Her hands told stories her lips couldn't form. She remembered the first time she touched piano keys. She had been 5, and they were at a church revival. Someone left the old upright unlocked after the sermon. Natalie had wandered up and pressed a single middle C. Her mother gasped. "That baby don't need to see to play," she whispered to the pastor. "She feels it." The day of the showcase, Natalie arrived with Marcus and Mr. Hampton, the school's retired music teacher who came out of retirement just to ride with her. He carried her old keyboard bag like it was a briefcase full of gold. They barely let her in. A woman at the front desk questioned her registration until she produced the email invite. Even then, they asked if she had a chaperone. Mr. Hampton cleared his throat and said, "She don't need one. She's not lost." They called her name last. Everyone else had played in black tuxedos or sparkling gowns. They bowed with flair, performed pieces by Chopin and Rachmaninoff, and left the crowd murmuring in approval. Then Julian Blake took the stage to introduce her, turning it into mockery. Now Natalie sat, alone at the piano. The lights dimmed. The room waited. She raised her hands. But she didn't play. Not yet. She hovered for 3 seconds, long enough for people to check if the piano was broken. Then, she struck a single note. It rang like a bell. Clear, confident, final. Then 2 more, forming a harmony no one recognized, but everyone felt. Her hands flew. No sheet music. No prelude. No warning. What came out of that piano wasn't just sound. It was a story, a protest, a prayer, a gut punch wrapped in beauty. Julian Blake stared, frozen, as the girl he mocked turned that stage into a battlefield. And she was winning. She didn't play like she wanted their approval. She played like she didn't need it. And that was only the beginning. Natalie's fingers were still trembling by the time they reached the side exit. She couldn't see the crowd, but she could hear them. Not the applause that had long since faded, but the shuffling, the way people whispered her name like it had suddenly acquired weight. Natalie Osbourne, the blind girl who played with fire in her hands. Mr. Hampton walked ahead, making space through the corridor with a protective energy. He wasn't smiling. His mouth was drawn tight, like someone who knew a storm was still coming. Marcus met her outside. He opened his arms, but paused. "Okay, if I—" Natalie nodded. He pulled her into a hug, his heart thudding against her ear. She held him tighter than usual. "You wrecked them in there," he said quietly. "They didn't even know what to do with themselves." She didn't answer. A voice behind them, smooth, clipped, cut through the air. "Impressive. If you like, interpretive jazz dressed up as classical." Marcus turned, jaw already clenched. Julian Blake. He was leaning against the stone wall outside the venue, arms folded, a toothpick between his teeth like he was auditioning for a villain in a soap opera. The glint in his eyes wasn't playful. It was dismissive. Natalie tilted her head slightly. She could feel his presence. Too tall to be Mr. Hampton, too cold to be anyone who'd clapped. "I don't remember you being part of the judges' panel," Marcus said. "I wasn't," Julian replied, flicking the toothpick onto the pavement. "But I do have ears. She's got feeling, I'll give her that. But this isn't a street show. This is the conservatory. And here, precision matters." Natalie stepped forward, cane tapping once. "How does Saul?" she said. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was surgical. Julian blinked. "I suppose you think music is all about feelings?" "I think music's about telling the truth," she replied. "And I don't need sight to know you stopped doing that a long time ago." Mr. Hampton let out the faintest snort. Julian's expression didn't change, but his silence did. "Come on, Nat," Marcus said. "We're not wasting breath on ghosts." As they walked off, Julian stood rooted to the spot, watching, thinking. Somewhere inside him, something flickered. Jealousy, maybe, or fear. Natalie didn't look back. She didn't need to. But 2 days later, the video went viral. Tiffany had recorded it from the 4th row and posted it with a caption that simply read, "She couldn't see the keys, but she knew where every soul in the room was hiding." By morning, it was everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, music blogs, even local news. Natalie didn't watch it. She listened to the audio once, then deleted the file. "I didn't play for them," she said to Marcus. "I just needed to say something." Marcus waved his phone. "Well, The whole damn world heard it. That day she got 27 interview requests, a dozen emails from talent agents, 3 college scholarship offers, and 1 letter that arrived the old-fashioned way, tucked in an envelope. No return address, just her name in silver ink. Natalie opened it while sitting on the edge of her bed, braille bumps rising under her fingertips as she read. It was an invitation, not to a concert, to a house. The letter read, "If you want to make noise, I can't help you. If you want to find your sound, come find me. H.C." Natalie read it twice, then handed it to Marcus. "What do you think?" she asked. He frowned. "You sure this ain't one of those scam producer people? No name, no contact number, just initials?" "Helen Carter," she repeated. "Helen Carter." His eyes widened. "Wait. That's real? That's the Helen Carter?" Natalie smiled. "I think I want to go." Marcus leaned back in his chair, running a hand down his face. "Jesus, that woman's a myth. She dropped out of the music world like a ghost. People say she used to play so beautifully that grown men cried."
Natalie whispered. "I want to know why she stopped." They drove 3 hours west of the city to find her. Past suburbs, past winding roads, past a lake that looked like a sheet of mercury under the sun.
Helen Carter lived in a faded blue house surrounded by trees older than any living person. Wind chimes danced in the breeze, and from the porch a piano melody floated like incense through the air. Haunting and incomplete. Marcus parked. "You sure about this?" "He asked me," Natalie said simply. They walked up the wooden steps. Natalie knocked.
The door opened not to a butler, not to an assistant, but to a woman with silver-streaked locks and eyes that looked like they could see through lies.
Helen Carter was tall, broad-shouldered, with fingers that bore the slight curvature of arthritis and stories. "You're late," she said without smiling. Natalie raised her chin. "I had to decide if you were real." Helen nodded once. "Fair." Inside, the house smelled like old paper and lemon balm. Bookshelves bowed under the weight of music theory and biographies. Pictures hung crookedly. Frames of her younger self with orchestras, old jazz clubs, street performances, but none recent, none beyond a certain point in time, as if history had abruptly stopped recording her after a certain note. The piano sat in the center of the room like a throne. "You want to learn?" Helen asked. "I want to understand," Natalie replied. Helen pointed to the bench. "Then start by unlearning." Natalie sat. "Play what you played the other night." Natalie hesitated. "I don't perform for—" "I didn't say perform," Helen snapped. "I said play. For you." So Natalie did. She let her fingers search the keys, not for applause, not for approval, but for honesty, for the reason she started playing in the first place. Each note came softer, more ragged, as if shedding its armor. When she finished, the air didn't move. Helen spoke without looking at her. "You play like someone fighting ghosts." Natalie swallowed. "Maybe I am." Helen turned, walking toward the window. "Then let me show you how to bury them." That was the beginning of everything. Natalie's mornings at Helen Carter's house didn't start with music. They began with silence. Helen insisted on it. No talking, no humming, no keys pressed. "You don't get to speak until your mind stops screaming," she said. So, Natalie would sit, legs crossed on a scratchy woven rug, her cane resting beside her, hands on her knees, heart thrumming with questions. At first, it felt pointless, irritating, but slowly, like a string unwinding, something inside her began to quiet. Helen brewed black tea in an old kettle that hissed louder than it should have. Her footsteps were always barefoot, soft, sure, slow. When she finally sat at the piano across the room, she'd speak just one word. Listen. Natalie would walk over, feeling the path by memory, and sit on the second bench beside her. Helen never let her touch the keys during this part. Instead, she played deliberately, brokenly, fragments of songs that had no names. "You don't need to hear the melody," Helen said. "You need to hear the fight inside it." One morning, after 2 weeks of lessons that didn't feel like lessons, Natalie finally asked, "Why me?" Helen didn't answer right away. She finished playing a single dissonant chord and let it hang in the room. Then, "Because you remind me of the girl I buried." Natalie turned slightly. "What girl?" "The one I used to be." Helen stood, walked toward the window. Her voice dropped. "I could play anything, technically. I could read a score and recreate it exactly. But one day I looked in the mirror and realized I wasn't saying anything with it. I wasn't telling anyone who I was. I was just good." Natalie nodded, though she couldn't see her. "And that wasn't enough?" Helen let out a bitter laugh. "No, because good can be replaced. Good gets copied. What lasts is what hurts to play." Later that afternoon, Helen handed her a book of blank sheet music. "Write something." Natalie touched the paper. "I don't read or write notes." "Then draw it. Carve it. Breathe it. Find a way." Natalie frowned. "You think sound can live in silence?" "I know it can," Helen said, "because I've been trying to hear mine again for 20 years. That night, Natalie stayed up late, pressing notes into the keyboard without turning on the speakers, feeling the vibrations in the tips of her fingers. She imagined each key was a different memory, each chord a part of her body. She didn't write anything down, but her palms remembered. The next morning, she played for Helen without being asked. It was quiet, raw, no grand crescendos, just something like a whisper given shape. A melody that rose like breath in cold air and fell like it had never existed. Helen didn't clap. She just whispered, "Now we begin." The weeks that followed were ruthless. Helen drilled her with exercises that burned her wrists, made her play blindfolded, not because she was blind, but because Helen insisted even blind people could get distracted by expectation. She forced her to listen to old recordings, monks chanting, subway trains breaking, babies crying, and asked her to replicate the rhythm. Natalie didn't complain. She bruised her knuckles, cracked her nails. Sometimes her hands swelled so much Marcus had to ice them for her when she got home. "You okay with this?" he asked one evening, rubbing her fingers gently. "She's making me fight," Natalie whispered. Marcus looked confused. "Fight what?" "I don't know yet. But it feels like something I've needed to punch for a long time." By week 6, she could replicate any tune Helen threw at her within a minute. But that wasn't enough. Helen began giving her challenges that didn't seem musical at all. Go walk through the woods and describe the sound of bark peeling. Tell me what A minor smells like. Write me a song that tastes like burnt toast. And forgiveness. Marcus thought it was ridiculous, but Natalie understood. Helen wasn't teaching her music. She was teaching her how to be honest without speaking. Then came the invitation. A letter, this time with a real seal, from the conservatory. "Natalie Osbourne, you are officially invited to perform at the International Youth Virtuoso Gala," the same one Julian Blake headlined last year. Marcus whooped, lifted her off her feet, and spun her around. Helen read it without emotion. "So," she said, folding the letter, "they want you back." Natalie nodded slowly. "It feels different now. That's because last time you wanted to prove you belonged. Now you have to prove you've changed." The weeks ticked closer. Natalie practiced harder than ever. Composed 3 original pieces. Tore them up. composed again. She didn't want to play something pretty. She wanted to play something that made people stop breathing. But the world hadn't stopped moving. One morning, Tiffany, yes, that Tiffany, sent her a link. Julian Blake had posted a video. In it, he smirked at the camera. The girl from the showcase? She's decent, but one performance doesn't make you an artist. Let's see how she does under real pressure. Natalie didn't respond. She didn't post. She didn't clap back. She played. She took that video, that smirk, that echo of mockery, and turned it into a chord progression. A slow, aching loop that built with every insult she'd ever swallowed. She added a melody on top that sounded like rising steps and falling pride. She called it the laugh before the note, and she was ready. Or so she thought, because 2 nights before the gala, Marcus came home with something in his hand. Manila envelope. He looked sick. Nat, this was taped to our front door. She opened it. Inside was a copy of her performance from the showcase. Annotated, marked up in red ink, derivatives of Chopin, clear jazz motifs lifted from glass, improvisation may be plagiarized from regional church gospel. No signature, no sender. Natalie's stomach twisted. Marcus snapped. It's that Julian jerk, I know it is. He's trying to scare you. Natalie sat down, slowly, quietly. I thought I was original, she whispered. Marcus dropped to his knees. You are. But what if I'm not? He grabbed her hands. Then you become it. Do you hear me? Natalie nodded, but inside, something cracked. She didn't sleep that night. She played the piano in total darkness. No lights, no sounds except her fingers and her breath. She didn't even know what she was playing. She just let it bleed. Ellen showed up the next morning, unannounced. She looked at Natalie's face, then at her swollen eyes. She didn't ask. She said, "Let me hear what you wrote last night." Natalie played. When she was done, Helen touched her shoulder. That wasn't music. Natalie stiffened. It was truth, Helen said. And Natalie, for the first time since that red ink letter, believed her. Backstage at the International Youth Virtuoso Gala smelled like nerves and hairspray. Natalie stood still in her simple black dress, hands folded gently over her cane. Marcus was beside her, holding her phone but not talking. He'd learned to be quiet in moments like this. Sometimes love meant silence. Sometimes silence was the only thing that made space for courage. She could hear the crowd through the curtain. Soft murmurs, a cough, a faint rustle of programs being flipped open. She didn't need to see the lights to know they were bright. She could feel their warmth leaking through the folds of the curtain, like sunlight spilling through a half-closed door. Inside her chest, something fluttered. But it wasn't fear. It was hunger. Not for fame, not even for approval. She was hungry to say something. The MC's voice rang out. Please welcome our next performer, Natalie Osbourne. Applause rose, not thunderous, but polite, curious. Natalie took a breath. Then another. Marcus touched her elbow, guiding her to the steps. She didn't need much help anymore. Her fingers had memorized the weight of this moment. She stepped onto the stage, walked to the grand piano, and waited. She didn't speak, didn't bow, didn't smile. The silence thickened. Then she played. Not the piece she wrote last month, not the one Helen told her would guarantee applause. She played the one she wrote in the dark, the one born from fear, accusation, and fire, the one she didn't title. The keys began soft, barely there, like footsteps on a dream. Then they grew stronger, a left-hand rhythm like a heartbeat, a right-hand melody like wind weaving through a story only she knew. Each note wasn't a sound, it was a sentence. I am not a copy. I am not an imitation. I am the original version of everything they said couldn't be real. And as she played, the sound filled the room, not just with music, but with memory, not hers. One judge leaned forward, breath held. The girl in the third row started crying quietly. Even Julian Blake, seated at the back in a crisp tuxedo, lowered his phone. She didn't need to see the room to know they were listening. Really listening. Because the music demanded it. Halfway through, her left hand struck a discordant note. On purpose. She let it hang, let it sting, then built something gentle around it, like forgiveness blooming through a bruise. The audience didn't move. At the end, there was no flourish, no dramatic close. Just 3 final notes. Then nothing. She stood, turned her head slightly toward the crowd, and walked off stage. No bow. No thank you. The applause didn't come immediately. It erupted like a dam breaking. People stood. People clapped until their hands ached. Someone shouted her name. But Natalie was already backstage, cane tapping quietly on the floor. Marcus caught her in a hug. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. A few minutes later, Helen Carter appeared, her face calm, eyes unreadable. Natalie turned toward her. "Did you hear it?" Helen nodded slowly. "I felt it." Madeline swallowed. "Was it enough?" Helen tilted her head. "That's not the question you should be asking." Natalie waited. Helen leaned in and whispered, "The real question is, did you hear it?" Natalie smiled. "I did." The awards portion of the evening came later. She didn't go back out for it. She didn't need a trophy. She had already won something else. Still, Principal Rose sent a photo to Marcus's phone later that night. It was a shot of the program, now updated. Best Original Composition, Natalie Osbourne. Marcus showed her. She grinned, but her fingers just twitched against her palm, already playing something new. Weeks later, Natalie stood at Roosevelt High's auditorium. She'd been invited back to perform for the student body. The room was full. Teachers, kids, janitors, even folks from the neighborhood who had heard the rumors. Julian Blake had also been invited. To teach, not perform. Some said it was damage control for how he'd handled himself publicly. Others said he asked for it himself. No one knew for sure. But he was there, sitting in the front row, arms crossed. When Natalie walked on stage, she wore jeans and a t-shirt. No spotlight. Just a keyboard and a mic. She sat. Speak for the first time before playing. I used to think music was about proving something, about making people see me. But now I know it's not about them seeing me. It's about me seeing myself. She turned toward the keys. And now I see everything. The song she played that day wasn't flawless. She'd hit one wrong note. But she didn't stop. She laughed. Softly and kept going. And that was what made it perfect. That night, Julian waited for her by the backstage door. She didn't flinch when she heard his voice. "You changed something tonight," he said. She paused. "Me?" He nodded. "Yeah. You made me remember what music felt like, before I'd turned it into a weapon." Natalie was quiet for a second. "You could still find it again." Julian smirked. "Maybe. But it'll take time. Then you'd better start." He looked at her for a long beat. "You're going to be big, Osbourne." "I don't care about being big," she replied. Julian raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you care about?" She smiled. "Patient, being real." He extended a hand. She didn't take it. But she nodded once, and that was enough. Months later, a video surfaced online. A small concert in a Harlem church. A teenage girl in twist braids, sunglasses, and calloused fingers played a song no one could name, but everyone remembered. The caption read, "Blind girl who stunned the world just did it again." But Natalie didn't read the comments. She was already writing her next song, in silence, where only the real music lives.